Good evening, everyone, and welcome to KTC SoCal, weekly Sangha gathering. My name is Jody, and I am the director of KTC SoCal, and we are so happy to have all of you here from all different time zones. Well, some of you are in our same time zone, actually. We welcome you to log on to our website, ktcsocal.org, where you can find information on our center, upcoming events, as well as different levels of membership. If you have any questions about becoming a member, please feel free to reach out to us. You can make a donation to Lama Kathy or to any of our teachers by following the link on the website or through the email newsletter announcement. This evening, we are pleased to welcome Lama Kathy, continuing our book study, The Joy of Wisdom by Mingyur Rinpoche. Before I hand it over to Lama Kathy, please do mute your microphones so we don't hear any background noise. And now I'm grateful that you're here, Lama Kathy, and I will hand it over to you. Thank you so much for joining us this evening.
Yeah, no, thanks to all of you. And I really appreciate the opportunity to talk to you this evening about the practices in this book, Joyful Wisdom by Mingyur Rinpoche. We've been working through the book gradually, little bit by little bit by little bit. And now we're in the chapter, let's see, I'm going to see about Shine, the practice of quiet sitting meditation. I'll see if for those of you who are following along in the book, I'll let you know what chapter we're on. I should have noted that. And well, I'm not finding the beginning of the chapter, so that's kind of fun. Okay, this is it's under part 2, experience, and chapter 6 is the tools of transformation. We're all the way at the different steps of the practices that he's giving, such as attending to sound, attending to breath. And tonight we're going to talk about attending to emotions. But before we do that, I wanted to see if we could do a little bit of discussion, first of all, about emotion. And I'm going to see if, I don't know if there's anybody who's willing to kind of like be a speaker, but I'm really curious as to whether people have specific struggles with their emotions, or if they find that that emotions interrupt their meditation, or that sort of thing. I don't know, because I'm interested in knowing how people handle their emotions, because this practice talks about emotions, but I'm kind of curious myself as to whether people have specific challenges with emotion, or if their meditation is challenged. So I don't know if you want to use the raise hand function, or if you want to unmute. Does anybody have anything they'd like to check in about? Okay, so yeah.
Frustration is always an issue.
Ooh.
Particularly at those points when there's it's compounded by the physical state, if I'm tired or sick or both. That's very hard to deal with, and sometimes that comes on very quickly, like lightning fast.
Are you thinking about meditation practice, or are you thinking about just life in general?
Life in general. Meditation practice generally is I'm sitting down and I'm not doing these other things right now, and so that's generally I can set that aside.
Thank you for mentioning that, because I'm one of those people that sometimes some type of frustration or aversion will come on really quick. So I understand what that feels like.
Hmm.
Anybody else have something they'd like to share? Okay. Well, then I'll tell you sort of my take on it as well, which is that I sometimes feel badly that that I haven't done a better job of taming my emotions. Let's put it this way. Because especially when they jump out at me, and I'm suddenly possessed by being impatient or angry or whatever I'm feeling. And so that makes me feel a little sad because I thought I was doing so well, you know? So it's like a compounded situation. And of course, and when we get to the book, Mingyur Rinpoche will have some strategies and tips for us. But I thought I would just say a couple of words at the beginning here about emotions. I remember when I first started learning meditation that I was surprised at the a number of emotions I would feel in a given day. It was a lot, and they would go really quick. Many people tell me that it reminds them of what happens in a dream. Sometimes you're dreaming, and while you are dreaming, you are like, first you're doing one thing, and then suddenly the scene changes and you're doing something else, and then suddenly the scene changes and you're doing something else, and you feel this and you feel that and you feel this and you feel that, and it's all coming really quick. And I realized after reflecting on this that because a person was once telling me about his dreams, and he said, "How many dreams can you have in a night?" And I said, "How many thoughts can you have in a day?" And so I'm thinking that there's a lot of episodic, that our daily life is very episodic. This is happening, and then this is happening, and this is happening. And the example I used was perhaps you're having a dream, and you're eating your lunch, and then suddenly you're having a dream, and then you're flying, or then the same dream changes and you see somebody who passed away years ago. This happened to me this morning. I right before I woke up, I saw somebody I hadn't seen in more than 50 years, maybe 60 years. And the person obviously has passed away, but they were talking to me. So and you wake up and you think, oh, well, you know, that was just a dream. But then you get in your car and then you're driving. And then suddenly you're thinking about, what am I going to eat for lunch? And then suddenly you think, oh, so and so, you know, passed away a number of years ago. Wow, what did they used to say about this or that? And so really, in a way, we kind of put a plot to all of our thoughts. We think there's a main character and it's us, and that we're living this life, and that the story of our life is playing out in all of these thoughts and feelings and emotions that we're having. And we're trying to glue all of these random thoughts and feelings together with a plot. But the fact of the matter is there's no plot. And that it really just is very random. Our experience of the world is very random. And emotions are part of this landscape, because sometimes when we have specific experiences, it keys into something from the past, something that that caused us pain in the past. Perhaps we lost something that was dear to us, or perhaps someone took something from us, and we feel hurt and aggrieved and angry. And perhaps we have, in the story of our life, we've cast ourselves as the victim of something that has been, some great injustice that has happened. And it keys into some feelings that we have. Well, when I first started talking about of Buddhism and emotions, when I first started teaching, it occurred to me something that Khenpo Karthar Rinpoche, our teacher, had said to me a number of years ago, and that was that the Buddha, when he was teaching about the mind and the things that appear in the mind and the experiences that arise in the mind, he didn't differentiate between thoughts, feelings, perceptions, and emotions. He didn't differentiate. He called them all mental events. So I guess when you have an idea, you could say, oh, I'm having a mental event. Or if you have a feeling or an intuitive thing, oh, I'm having a mental event. And it's the same with emotions. The trouble for us as human beings is that we've lived our entire lives so far thinking that emotions were special, that emotions meant something, and that there's some secret some secret information that's inside the emotion that's telling us how important it is. And I think it wasn't until I started meditating that I began to understand this a little better. Because I don't know if this has happened to any of you when you meditate, but there have been times when I'm meditating and I'm watching the breath and I'm sticking with it as best I can, and I wander off into the past or I wander off into the future, but then I always keep coming back to the breath. But this happened to me one time where I suddenly remembered something painful and I got angry while I was sitting on my meditation seat. And then I noticed that I was thinking, and I labeled the angry thought thinking, and I let it go and returned to the breath for a fresh start to my meditation. And the anger disappeared completely. And I said to myself, that's interesting. If emotions are that special and they carry that special of a thing, then why did it just disappear if it's that special? And then it occurred to me that that the emotions that we have, sometimes we don't like them, but sometimes we do like them. And in fact, we kind of treasure them and prize them and use them as proof of something, like, oh, I really care because I'm so hurt, or I really I need to have this person in my life because I like them so much. I must have them in my life. And this, of course, just makes us go back and forth and back and forth. So in a way, emotions kind of run the show sometimes for us and cause us extra pain. I remember when I first started talking to folks about emotions, I said, well, emotions are just thoughts that have a lot of history. You know, emotions are just thoughts that have a lot of history. There's a lot of habit energy behind these particular thoughts. And I used an example that I can still use today, which is, let's say that I've had an argument with somebody and I've quarreled with somebody, and they hurt my feelings. And then maybe some days have passed and I go to a gathering and then the person comes in the door and I instantly feel angry again, instantly. And if you look at what actually happened, a person came in a door at a moment when I could see them. And the first thing that happened is that my eyes took in the sight of that person. So that's a perception. And then my Rolodex of memory said, it's them. And then the moment we identified it as the person who hurt my feelings, it gave rise to all of these amazing feelings, awful feelings, angry feelings and so forth. But it really just had to do with one tiny little thought. It's them. And that really gave rise to this emotional reaction. And so I thought about this, and it struck me that emotions are sort of like weeds, in that you can cut a weed off at the ground, but the root stays below it, right? And so the minute a good rain comes down, or you water the ground, instantly that weed comes back again. It never has gone away. And so in one of Khenpo Karthar Rinpoche's teachings about emotion, he said that the practice of quiet sitting meditation allows us to pacify emotion by not following the emotions. We have that thought, like that angry thought that I had, that I identified, and I let go, and it actually stayed gone. It disappeared. And that was kind of surprising to me, to know that I could let a thought go that had that much habit energy of anger behind it, and then it just disappeared. It revealed itself as just a thought. And so that meant to me, potentially, every emotion could be dealt with and worked with and engaged with. And I think that's kind of the lesson that I learned from my experience in shamatha, is that you can drop a thought and it will disappear and stay gone. But sometimes I like the feeling that I just had, and so I'm going to claw it back. I know I want that feeling. I want to have that bad feeling. I'm just, it's familiar to me. I want that. And when Khenpo Karthar Rinpoche was talking about this, he said that the emotions that we feel, he said they may be pacified by shamatha because you stop feeding them. But the roots of those emotions, the self-fixation that gives rise to those emotions, are still below the surface. And that this was what he said was the value of lojong, or mind training practice. When you do shamatha practice, you begin to notice your emotions, and you begin to categorize them and recognize when they're happening, but you can't necessarily do anything about them. But he said that at least you know that they can be pacified. But if you really want to uproot the emotions, he said, you have to go below the surface. And he said, what takes us below the surface is the practice of compassion meditation, or Tonglen, where as you breathe out, you think you give goodness to others. And as you breathe in, you think you remove their suffering. And by doing this compassion practice, we begin to increase our internal capacity for compassionate thought and compassionate action. And by increasing our capacity for compassionate thought and action, we can begin to feel compassion for our emotions as they're arising. And being able to do this, we see them in a new light, and we are able to set them aside more readily. So I just wanted to talk a little bit about emotion in general before getting into Mingyur Rinpoche's exercises with emotions, because these exercises, I think, are part of the solution for working with emotion. Because I'm going to make ask you to listen for something as I'm reading this section to you. But what I've noticed is that if I can notice the emotion as an emotion, as a thought, as an emotion instead of putting myself instantly into the scene of that emotion. Like that person I saw come through the door who hurt my feelings, I'm still angry with them. And yes, I'm going to go say something to them, or I'm going to just like stare daggers at them across the room or whatever, because I'm still not over my anger. Well, that means I'm still inside the emotion. I'm still inside the story that the emotion is telling me, that I was an aggrieved party and that person caused it. So the Buddhist teaching on emotion, then, to summarize, is that emotions all of them begin as tiny thoughts. And what happens is that because of our habit of indulging in those tiny thoughts that become emotions, and our value for emotions, thinking that they're better than thoughts, somehow different and somehow better than thoughts, is what allows us to keep having these reactions over and over again, instead of examining them to find out how necessary they really are. Maybe there's a different way to address the situation of seeing someone who hurt me than to be angry. Maybe there's a different response that I could have. So in any case, before I go on, does anybody have any questions about what we talked about so far, about emotions starting as little tiny thoughts that get fed by our habit energy and then indulged in through our storytelling mind and so on? Does anybody have questions or observations? Okay, just thought I would check. So now we're in Mingyur Rinpoche's book, in the chapter on meditation, step 6, attending to emotions. He says, emotions are often vivid and enduring, but those same qualities of being vivid and enduring, but those same qualities can be very useful as supports for our practice. See, he's telling us to notice. Intensity and the persistence of a feeling can, in itself, become a focus for looking at the mind. At the same time, those same characteristics of intensity and persistence can make it a bit difficult to work with emotions right away. In other words, when we're new to meditation, it might be more difficult to work with emotions than it would if we had practiced for a while. He says, sometimes an emotion or an emotional tendency persists on such a deep level that we don't easily recognize it as a conditioning effect. In other words, we've been conditioned to respond to specific feelings in specific ways. He said that's why it's important to work with the first few steps of attention training first. In doing so, he says, you gain some familiarity with stabilizing your awareness to the point at which you can observe whatever passes through your mind without too much attachment or aversion. So you remember that Mingyur Rinpoche's basic meditation technique of being aware of one's natural awareness and doing that as a form of shamatha meditation can be a valuable skill to cultivate in being able to look at thoughts and perceptions that arise. So he says, early on in his own training, he says, my father and my other teachers impressed on me that there are 3 very basic categories of emotion: positive ones, negative ones, and neutral ones. Each corresponds to the 3 main tick boxes that we view ourselves in our experience: the I like it box, the I don't like it box, and the I don't know box. Positive, or what we might call constructive emotions, like compassion, friendship, loyalty, and so forth, strengthen the mind, build confidence, and enhance our ability to assist those in need of help. Negative emotions, such as fear, anger, sadness, jealousy, and envy, tend to weaken the mind. And it says, tend to weaken the mind, undermine confidence, and increase fear. Oh, I see it. There's a question. Should I stop?
Yes, please, just for a moment.
Yeah.
So in natural awareness, is the object of meditation just being aware? What is the, because we're not looking at a Buddha image, right? Not necessarily. In natural awareness, what is the object?
The object in resting in awareness, according to the teachings he's given here, and I'll have to look up the page for you because I don't have that readily here. I may have marked it, but if I haven't, then I'll have to go look it up. Is awareness itself. And the way he explained this to me when I actually asked him about it a number of years ago, I said, well, can you explain this awareness to me? How do I know when I'm having it? And he said, well, he said, you're aware. He waved his hand and he said, now, can you see this? And I'm like, yeah, I'm like right here. But yes, I can see that. And he said, can you hear this? And I said, yes, I can hear that. And he said, this is awareness at work. He said, you're aware of what you see, you're aware of what you hear, and you can also be aware of awareness.
Yeah.
And that was very helpful. However, elsewhere in the book, he's reminding us that being aware of awareness is not something we're used to doing. So since it's not something we're used to doing, we can only do it for short periods of time. So we would be aware for a period of time, then relax, and then be aware for a period of time, and then relax. And that is one way to develop the capacity to rest in awareness. But even if you're not resting in awareness, but merely doing the breath awareness shamatha that we've all known and loved, you will still, over time, get better at noticing thoughts that kind of bubble up, right? While we're watching the breath, we'll actually notice that a thought has arisen. And if we just stick with the breath, sometimes it will just disappear, And if it doesn't, if it grabs our attention, then we will, if we're lucky, when we've been thinking that thought for a moment, we'll recognize that we're thinking. We can label it thinking, let it go, and then return the attention to the breath again. And sometimes that thought will disappear. Sometimes the thought will not disappear because it's insistent. See, and this is one of the things he said is a hallmark of emotion, that it tends to persist. So does that help at all, or does it open up more questions?
Yeah, it helps. I understand. Yeah.
Okay, yeah. So let's see. Okay, so then he says the method of observing emotions as supports for your practice varies according to the type of emotion you're experiencing. If you're feeling a positive emotion, you can focus on both the feeling and on the object of the feeling. For example, if you're feeling love for a child, you can rest your attention on both the child and the love you feel for him or her. If you're feeling compassion for someone in trouble, you can focus on the person needing help and your feeling of compassion. He says in this way, the object of your emotion becomes a support for the emotion itself, while the emotion itself then can become a support for focusing on the object. Then he says, on the other hand, holding an object of negative emotion in our attention, it tends to reinforce the idea of that person being the cause of our negative emotion. No matter how much you try to cultivate compassion, confidence, or any other positive feeling, you will almost automatically associate the object with the negative emotion. That person hurts. Resist it, try to change it, or run away. So he says, I've also seen this tendency sometimes when people talk about someone toward whom they feel a romantic attraction. So he's saying that romantic attraction is another one of these persistent emotions that gets caught up with the object. They feel the attraction strongly, but the more they try to pursue the other person, the more the other person tends to turn away. So the person who is feeling the attraction begins to feel that there is something wrong or unattractive about themselves. Or the person in whom they're attracted might be seen as being cruel or unreliable or flawed. In fact, he said, there's nothing wrong or bad about the person who is attracted, and there's nothing wrong about or the blah 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 blah. Okay, let's see. In fact, there's nothing wrong or bad about the person who is attracted and the person to whom one is attracted. They're both expressing the infinite capacity of their Buddha nature to be attracted or not, to desire or not to desire. He said, but we tend to take these expressions personally. Remember I said we jump into the story of the emotion, like I want this person to like me. And it says, but we tend to take them personally as a way of defining ourselves. So these thoughts become a story, and the story becomes good or bad depending on what's going on for us. So then he says a more practical approach to emotion, similar to that of working with thoughts, which he taught previously, is simply to rest your attention on the emotion itself rather than on the object. Just look at the emotion without analyzing it intellectually. Don't try to hold on to it or resist it. Simply observe it. When you do this, the emotion won't seem as solid, lasting, or true as it initially might have. So what he's getting at here is that when we look at the emotion, and by look, what that really means is we turn our attention toward the emotion. We attend to that experience of that feeling. When we attend to the experience of that feeling, sometimes it will disappear. Or if we just watch it go by, it will change. And so, in other words, we're not trying to resist the emotion, we're just observing it. And then he says, sometimes, however, well, let me back up here. Remember a couple of talks ago, I was talking about the skill that we get from shamatha to take one step back from the story that we're telling ourselves about something that's happening. We take one step back, again, as though to watch the emotion from the outside or to watch the story from the outside. And the instant we step outside the story, then our feeling is different. Our emotion is changing because we've stepped out of the story and we've just looked at the feeling itself. And this actually can give us an idea of how emotion works within us to sort of take us over, and how stepping back from it can give us an opportunity to see our emotions differently so that we don't necessarily have to be victimized or feel victimized by our emotions. Does that make sense? So anyway, so going on, Mingyur Rinpoche said, sometimes, however, the object associated with a disturbing emotion, like a person, a place, or an event, it's just too vivid. It's too strong. It's too vivid to or present to ignore. Khenpo Karthar Rinpoche said this one time. He said a lot of our emotions are so they key into a place that is very deep and very old in us. And he said they're going to knock you over. Those emotions will knock you over and you won't be able to observe them. You won't be able to work with them. You won't be able to engage with them. And so and so he said that's going to happen. And this is why the compassion practice is so important, because he said if something has just overwhelmed you completely, then it's probably better to back up a little bit and remind yourself that indulging the emotion is not helpful, and then to practice a little bit of emotional rescue for yourself, and do some compassion meditation for yourself, breathing in and working to release the feelings that you're having. So there's a couple of different ways to work with them. So he says, if that's the case, if you're overwhelmed by an emotion, by all means, don't try to block the emotion. Rest your attention on the sensory perceptions related to the object of your emotion. According to the methods of attention discussed earlier. In so doing, the object of emotion can become a powerful support for meditation, as powerful as the emotion itself. So in other words, if it makes you feel cold, or if it makes you feel warm, or if it makes you feel pain, then you can attend to the sensations, the physical sensations that you're feeling, rather than to the emotion or its object. So then he said, let's begin to use the method of attention to observe emotions. He said, when you do this practice, he said, keep it short, continuing perhaps for only a minute or two, shifting between objectless attention and attention to your emotions. Start by, he says, taming your horse. Remember, he talked about that in the initial sections of this chapter. Positioning your body in a way that's both relaxed and alert. Next, he said, rest in objectless attention for a few moments. This is the being aware of your mind's natural awareness. Then bring your attention to whatever emotion you're feeling. You may be experiencing more than one at the same time, so let your attention be drawn simply to the one that is most vivid for you at the moment. Inasmuch as certain emotions like jealousy, frustration, anger, or desire may be particularly intense, it's important to just look at them lightly. Don't try to analyze them or to figure out why or how they came about. The main point is to simply allow yourself to become aware of their presence. Then he says, rest your mind for a moment in attention. And then he asks the person reading the book to just let their mind rest. And then he says, watch your emotions for a few moments. So we'll do that. Not necessary to name them, just observe. Then he said, after you've done that, then you can rest your mind again in objectless attention, just attending to the moment. So in this way, he has you do all these alternating. Rest your mind for a moment in objectless attention, then watch your emotions for maybe a minute, he says, and then rest your mind in objectless attention again. Then he says, at the end of the process, ask yourself what the experience of observing your emotions was like. Did the emotions persist as you observed them? Did they change? Were they clear? Or did they just hide when you tried to look at them? Did you experience any gaps between one emotion and the next? Were they predominantly constructive or destructive? He said, as we look at our emotions in this way, we begin to see the potential for every type of emotion as the basis for recognizing the mind that is having those emotions, the mind that is aware of those emotions. Sometimes we act out on our emotions. In the case of positive or constructive emotions, we shall discover, the beneficial effects can be immense, not just for ourselves, but for those around us. Most of us, however, are caught up in some sort of mix between constructive and destructive emotions. These tendencies are more often than not very layered, like the different layers of rock in a wall of the Grand Canyon. The benefit of looking directly at each layer lies in recognizing that each is an expression of our capacity to see. Again, awareness itself, our ability to be aware, our ability to be, to experience is it being expressed as these emotions. And so then he said, as we move into chapter 8 on insight, he says the next set of practices offers a means of working with these layers to cut through their seeming solidity. And so then he moves into chapter 8, which is titled Insight. So we'll start with that the next time we get together. But for now, I think that this exercise is really useful because I understand what we were talking about at the beginning, you know, the frustration that a person can feel, and that it when we're feeling tired or we're feeling unwell, that it's a lot easier to feel impatience or frustration. And I think that being able to take that one step back and watch ourselves experience this it's very important, because that's the start of freedom for us, so that we no longer feel victimized by our emotions or feel at the mercy of our emotions. And I think shamatha begins the process of awareness, being aware of emotions, and then exercises like the one he just described of resting your mind in this objectless attention, and then attending to whatever is on the mind, whether it's thoughts or feelings or emotions, and then doing that for about a minute, and then returning to objectless attention, and is a good short meditation to allow ourselves to experience emotions without the usual overlay of secondary emotions like I'm angry that I'm frustrated and so forth. Okay, so other things that people might want to talk about or ask about. It's been fun to go over this.
Lama Kathy, I've been thinking about someone in my family who, let's say, how do I say it? Like their emotions kind of take them down this rabbit hole almost. They go way down that rabbit hole. Think about how are they watching their minds and emotions with that? And there's a better way to pay attention to it and lift them back up out of that. It's so much healthier for our state of mind, also for our healing, for every part of for everything that's going on, because our thoughts have and our emotions have everything to do with our physical being as well.
Right.
So that's something that I've been trying to help this certain person with.
Yeah.
But there's just so much you can say too.
Well, that's right. And, you know, I think that sometimes it's we have difficulty getting through to people in our own family And I think the reason for this, because I've talked with my own counselor about this, and because when my parents were alive, I had difficulty getting through to them about certain things. And what she said to me, my counselor said to me was, she said, you know, in her experience, she said, I seldom see members of the family being the person to get through to someone. She said, what I see more, she said, is strangers coming into the family member's life who say exactly the same thing that the family member has been saying. And then the person, because it's from a source outside the family, the person hears it. Even if they're saying exactly the same thing, they hear it from the stranger, but can't hear it from the family member. And she says, I'm not sure, but she said, my theory about this is that they've learned over the years to tune out members of the family or to discount what the family member is saying. They've sort of developed a habit of doing that. And the habit is not helpful, but it's their habit, right? So I feel like I really like the idea of observing what they're going through and just being present with them as they feel these things. And that can be kind of a powerful thing right there. Just reflecting back to the person, you know, because but then in terms of breakthroughs and stuff like that, I guess we have to, you know, all I can think of is that we have to do our best, you know, to make progress in our own minds, you know, and
A
yeah,
huge, it's been a huge thing for me too, a practice of my own mind and
yeah,
how I want to get, I don't want to say too much, and how
yeah,
can I be as compassionate as possible? And sometimes that's just not saying anything and just being there.
yeah, being present and listening, right? Exactly. And then when you're not with the person, you can do the compassion practice with them in mind. You can breathe out and imagine giving them goodness and healing from their feelings, and breathe in and remove their, you know, their feeling of being overwhelmed or emotions or whatever. And then after you've done it for the person you care about, then you do it for everybody who feels like that. And then you do it for everybody in the world. And gradually in this way, you can start with one person. This was Rinpoche's instruction. He said, if you start with one person only, and you only ever do for Tonglen, this compassion practice for one person, it could actually increase a negative relationship between you and the object of that you're using. And he said, whereas if you start with the one person and then gradually expand it to include everyone, then you can see how everyone in the world is just like the person you care for, like that, right? So I really feel for this, because it's very hard to watch people suffer, and you know, and not be able to reach in and make an impact, you know, like, hey, can I just like get in there and adjust how you feel? you know, you know, I don't mean to make light of a situation that can be very painful, but that's how I feel sometimes. You know, I wish there was something I could do, when the best thing I can do is pray for them when I'm not with them, and like shower, you know, light from the medicine Buddha on them, or shower light from the Chenrezig on them, and so forth, you know. So yes, yeah, I see there's anyhow, thank you for that. Thank you for that observation. You know, I'll pray for the situation myself too. So thanks for sharing that. Yeah, I see, Daniel, you've got your hand up. I can't see other people's hands up, so we'll have to do our best.
So I took some courses in speaking of family matters and wanting to see people change. I took some courses in nonviolent communication. And one of the things they say is that when you give people advice without them asking for it, that's a form of violence.
Hmm.
They use the word violence, not like physical violence, but
Yeah.
we put ourselves as better than others, or
Yeah.
we're smarter than others. And I'm wondering what would the Dharma say about giving advice when it's not asked for?
Yeah. This is very tough. This is really tough because interestingly enough, I remember Khenpo Karthar Rinpoche himself saying that when you meet someone who has come to your meditation group, he said the first thing you need to do for a new person, he said, is just listen. Just listen to what they have to say. And he said, after they've said the things they want to say, he said, just say what's in your, sort of like, he said, just give them the best response you can, which in a way does open the door for advice to come out. But I think that learning a skill like nonviolent communication and recognizing that the person has come to the meditation center seeking some comfort and possibly some advice. It's a different setting, isn't it?
Yeah, that's different than a family setting, right?
But you still have to be careful. And I really appreciate you bringing this up. I really do. I appreciate you bringing this up because it reminds me of the situation that can arise when a well-meaning person comes on too strong and pushes the other person too hard with advice, right? And I know I've been guilty of that myself. So, yeah, just remembering to listen and not push too hard is really important. And just say, well, I appreciate you sharing your story with me, and I'm hoping that meditation can be helpful, and and that we're here for you. So thanks for asking about that or mentioning that. I appreciate it.
Okay.
Lama Kathy, can I say something real quick?
Yes, please. Yes, please. Yeah, because we've got another few minutes.
It just brought up I remember like when my daughter was little, she was having trouble with a friend of hers in school that she felt was kind of being mean to her or whatever. And on that particular day, I just stopped and I was just thinking about like her situation. And I remember telling her, I have an idea. For the next week, I want you to just notice if Alex, the other girl was Alex, if that's something that's happening to other people as well and not just to you. But I don't want you to do anything. I just want you to observe and just see how it goes. And now that I'm thinking about that, I'm thinking about like sometimes with my own emotions, maybe, instead of getting caught up in things, I should do the same, like just try to observe, like you were talking about, and see if that's not, if there's something else going on, or just step, like you were just saying, step back from it a little bit. And just recently, I've started this new course where I'm working on some stuff with myself. And for the first time in my life, a lot of the little things that used to be get me into trouble, or make me feel bad, or not make me not feel good enough, or da 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 da. It's like suddenly it's like they weren't there, and I felt like now they were my team to support me. And I even had this experience where they said to me, "Oh my goodness, I am so happy to have a new job. That old job was just getting so old, and we were just so tired of it, and we're so grateful to have a new opportunity to do something new and exciting." And I'm just, you know, I
Super.
thought I'm just trying to hang on to that, but at the same time, it's like not grasp it, but just, just kind
Right.
of go with it a little bit.
Well, I really appreciate you sharing this because it's about that shift in perspective, right?
Yeah. Yeah.
It,
And I mean,
it's a, yeah.
it was like for the first time in my, I mean, thank God it finally happened. A shift happened, for goodness sake.
Well, I really, really appreciate you sharing this because I think we all need a shift in perspective sometime. In fact, that's really what this taking one step back is all about, which is
Yeah.
interesting because that's what you told your daughter to do essentially, right? Just take one
Yeah.
step back, right? And
Yeah.
now you're doing it with your team, so to speak, right? And
Yeah.
because otherwise, we would have jumped headlong into some story, right? So not doing that and holding back from doing that is not depriving us of anything really, except the the negative consequences of jumping into a story and then taking it on, so.
Yeah. And there were a couple little things that happened last night that almost kind of got me back into being scared that this positive stuff wasn't going to happen and blah blah blah.
Yeah,
And
yeah.
and then I thought, and then I remembered saying to myself, "Oh, oh, I just finished this little honeymoon phase, and now there's this little new chance to look at this in a new way." But it was just,
Yeah.
I mean, it just felt like so good not to just, like Jody said, go down the rabbit hole, but be able to just kind of look
Yeah.
at it and not get stuck in it.
The skill is there. That's the thing. See, you know what the skill is and you know how it feels to do it. And maybe there'll be some time you'll be totally overwhelmed by something, but more and more often you'll be able to step back like that.
Yeah, I like what you were saying about the part about when it is overwhelming to just, can you like say that again exactly? Like,
I'll
are
tell you
you,
what, I probably won't be able to say it exactly how I said it because see,
yeah, but just, I
I
guess for all of us, like it just a step, like you
Yeah.
oh, you said
Ah,
don't look at the overwhelm, but look at the things that it's bringing up or something.
yeah, I think maybe the way one way to go about this is, again, I will not be able to remember precisely. Mingyur Rinpoche did have a description for that, but let's see here. See if I can find it quickly. If not, I'll just have to give you my best approximation, okay? Let's see, more practical approach. He says, just look at the emotion without analyzing it intellectually. Don't try to hold on to it or resist it. Simply observe it. So he said, when you do this, the emotion won't seem as solid, lasting, or true as it initially did. So kind of for me, what this means is just taking a moment to look at the emotion as though you were standing outside of it, which essentially you are. When you stop being inside it, you are then from the outside, you're seeing it. And then you can apply, if you know the practice of Tonglen, you can apply that and take on the emotion as well as giving yourself healing. But there's a lot of other techniques, where you can work with emotions that you've recognized as emotions and try to find ways to work with them that are more healthy than other ways. Does that make sense?
It does. I remember you're telling me about the Tonglen practice, and I have used it. So I'm just reminding myself, to use that again when I need to.
Exactly, because when we start engaging with the emotions in this more constructive way, whether it's, engaging the team or engaging Tonglen or whatever we engage, we change the habit. You see what I'm saying? We sort of flip the script and change how we work with these feelings. And we're no longer, again, the victim of them. We're helping to, examine and be with in a different way. So I appreciate it.
Thank you.
Okay, well, because of time, we'll have to stop here for this evening, but it's been great. That I really appreciate, especially your patience at the beginning when I was talking about emotions in general, because that was all kind of like my stuff. Mingyur Rinpoche was able to put it all into context, and so it all worked out. But even if all we can do is notice them more, and then just observe rather than jumping into them or running away from them. These are all, constructive ways we can work with it. So next time we'll start on the chapter 8, which is on insight, and looking to see what else we can learn about thoughts. So I want to thank all of you for being here and bringing your goodness here. And I want to thank you for continuing to support each other in your practice and encourage you to keep going. And let's do a dedication of merit. I'll recite a simple prayer in English. Through this merit, may all achieve the omniscience of Buddhahood. May it defeat our common enemy, wrongdoing. From the stormy waves of birth, old age, sickness, and death. From the ocean of samsara, may we free all beings. May we free all beings. May we free all beings. Thanks, everyone.